the vice president thought he was in control. The panel had been billed as a bipartisan conversation and just another polished discussion about reshaping school funding formulas. Live-streamed from inside the Rayburn House office building in D.C., it was supposed to be civil, maybe even dull. Talking points, policy jargon, a few polite jabs. Then JD Vance leaned into the mic, gave his signature smirk, and dropped the line. "Maybe we should both take an IQ test to settle this once and for all." It wasn't shouted. It wasn't sarcastic. That's what made it sting. The moderator, Lynette Harmon, blinked fast. You could hear someone crinkle a coffee cup in the back. Jasmine Crockett didn't move. She just tilted her head slightly, eyes still locked on him. "That your closing argument?" she asked quietly. Vance shrugged. "Just a thought." He turned back toward the moderator, clearly expecting the conversation to move on. But Jasmine wasn't finished. She reached into her briefcase, slow and deliberate. From a slim interior sleeve, she pulled out a single white envelope, sealed, pristine, stamped with the gold insignia of the Congressional Testing Initiative. She slid it across the table without a word. A gasp somewhere near the press row. Lynette froze. "I asked them to keep it sealed," Jasmine said. "Just in case." She leaned back. Unbothered. Silent. The panel was no longer about school budgets. Vance's expression faltered, just for a moment. He didn't smirk. Didn't speak. Lynette glanced at the envelope. "Congresswoman Crockett, a broken bar, is that your official CTI score?" Jasmine nodded. "Yes." Someone in the audience murmured, "Damn." Phones went up. The live-stream viewer count started spiking. Vance shifted in his chair, tried to smile but it didn't touch his eyes. "You're serious?" "Dead." Jasmine turned to the moderator. "You're welcome to open it." The air changed. This wasn't a panel anymore, it was a moment. One of those rare, irreversible political ruptures. Lynette looked toward the panel assistant, who turned to the staff attorney. A slight shake of the head. But Jasmine cut in. "Legally, I can authorize it. This is my property." The envelope sat at the center of the table like a live grenade. Lynette picked it up like a judge about to read a verdict. JD Vance didn't say a word. And to understand why that sealed envelope mattered so much, you'd have to rewind months. Jasmine Crockett didn't become a threat because she yelled. She became one because she didn't flinch. From the moment she arrived in Congress, she had been sharp, unapologetic, and uninterested in softening her tone to make people comfortable. She didn't perform. She didn't code switch. And that unnerved people like JD Vance. Vance had spent his entire political career curating an origin story. From Middletown, Ohio, to the Marines, to Yale Law. Memoirist. Senator. Now Vice President. His narrative was that he'd survived the fall of the American dream. Jasmine's existence threatened to expose how selective that dream really was. Their friction began in silence, Vance ignoring her points in joint sessions, talking over her just subtly enough to avoid headlines. But that changed with the education equity proposal. Jasmine's plan restructured how federal dollars flow and fixing formulas that sent more money to already wealthy school districts. Vance dismissed it as punishing excellence. At a hearing in Indianapolis, they clashed. Jasmine pointed out that schools in majority-black districts receive up to 30% less funding than nearby white schools. Vance interrupted her twice. When she asked to finish, he waved it off with, "I'm just helping clarify for the audience." She sat there, silent, letting the camera roll. "Then, do I look like I need your help clarifying anything?" Click. Viral. From that moment, the tension wasn't just political. It was cultural, structural, personal. And behind the scenes, Jasmine made a decision. She enrolled quietly in the voluntary CTI testing program for federal leaders. No press. No statement. She sat for it under a false name at a testing center outside Fort Worth. Told only one person, her chief of staff, Leela. Why? Leela had asked. Because they'll come for my tone. Then my credentials. Then my intelligence, Jasmine replied. I'm just loading the ammo early. She didn't expect to need it. Until JD baited her. On camera. With millions watching. Back in room 2141, Lynette opened the envelope. The gold seal cracked. The camera zoomed in. Jasmine sat still. Calm. Lynette read, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett scored in the 98th percentile in analytical reasoning, 97th in spatial logic, 95th in executive processing. Overall, top 2% of the federal leadership cohort. No applause. Just impact. JD Vance adjusted his mic. Cleared his throat. But for the first time that day he said nothing. Lynette turned gently. Would you like to respond, Mr. Vice President? Vance blinked. Well, a broken bar. I wasn't aware those scores were meant to be made public. They weren't, Jasmine replied. Unless you asked for it. A few chuckles. Quiet, nervous. The kind that follows tension snapping. We'll take a 5-minute recess, Lynette announced. But the cameras stayed live. In the hallway, Jasmine's staff hovered around her. Leela handed her water. You didn't have to do that, she said. But I'm glad you did. Jasmine smiled. He wanted a test. I just had mine ready. 5 minutes later, they returned to the table. The lights felt brighter now. Even if they weren't. Before we resume, Lynette began, Vice President Vance, would you like to clarify your earlier remark? Vance's voice was steady. But the edge was gone. I want to thank the Congresswoman for her transparency, he said. It was an impressive gesture. Leadership requires more than intelligentsia, it takes vision and the ability to inspire. He was stalling. Everyone knew it. Lynette turned to Jasmine. There's truth in that, she said. Leadership is layered. But the reason I came here with policy, and that envelope, is because when women like me speak, there's always a second narrative waiting. One that questions our tone, our facts, our right to be in the room. So I carry my answers with me. Just in case. This time, the audience didn't applaud. Quiet. Then louder. The panel moved forward. Policy slides. Education frameworks. But the energy had shifted. JD Vance had come looking for a headline. Jasmine Crockett gave him a reckoning. The panel resumed, but the temperature in the room had changed. Not warmer. Sharper. The kind of air you get after lighting a charge and waiting. Lynette did her best to steer the conversation back to the policy at hand. So, returning to the framework. Congresswoman Crockett, you've suggested a hybrid model that blends local income metrics with federal intervention? Jasmine nodded. Calm. Focused. Correct. The model mirrors systems already working in parts of Massachusetts and Minnesota districts where need, not just property values, determine the floor of funding. It doesn't erase local control. It reinforces equity. Vance cut in. But isn't that assuming the federal government knows better than families? Jasmine turned to him. Number. It assumes that a child's zip code shouldn't decide if their library has books from this century. Murmurs. Someone in the gallery murmured, say that again, a broken bar. JD Vance smiled. It didn't land. He adjusted his mic. With respect, Congresswoman, you're building a system on emotion. Your proposals lack firm financial modeling. They sound good. But good isn't always sound. Jasmine's voice didn't rise. Let me remind you, my framework has been vetted by 3 independent education economists, including one your office consulted last year. If you'd read the binder in front of you. He held up a hand, not interrupting, just gesturing. She didn't stop. You'd see pages 47 through 59 address implementation costs, including how states with revenue shortfalls can opt onto federal equalization grants without raising taxes. Vance blinked. His fingers tapped the table once. Twice. The audience caught it. So did the camera. He was unraveling. Slowly. Quietly. But publicly. And his team knew it. In the press box, Vance's senior comms director, Mallory Grace, was already drafting a pivot statement. Something about intellectual humility, maybe. Or mutual respect across the aisle. But she could feel this wasn't going away in one news cycle. She texted the White House press lead, she had the envelope. He asked for it. Not great. reply, run containment. We'll call later. Meanwhile, online, the moment was mutating into something much bigger. Clips were everywhere. On one side, JD Vance, mic in hand, making the remark. On the other, Jasmine, sliding the envelope, common razor sharp. The memes were instant. You sure about that? 98th percentile energy. Sealed, stamped, delivered. Back inside room 2141, the panel was wrapping. Lynette did her best to land the plane. I think today showed how deeply people care about this issue and the importance of data, dialogue, and yes, a broken bar, even difficult moments. Vance smiled. Barely. Jasmine thanked the moderator, shook hands, and walked off with Leela toward the staff hallway. JD lingered. For a few seconds, he just stood at the table, looking at the empty envelope still sitting there. He didn't touch it. Backstage, one of his advisors whispered, "We'll frame it as a bold conversation." Two leaders pushing boundaries. Vance didn't answer. He just rubbed his chin and muttered, "She set the whole damn thing up." But she hadn't. Not really. She'd prepared. Quietly. Privately. He handed her the stage. She just used it. That night, the panel made national headline as every network, every feed. Crockett flips narrative with quiet precision. IQ test challenge backfires on VP. Policy panel turns into defining moment. Commentators tried to frame it as a clash of styles, or a generational divide. But something deeper had happened. Jasmine hadn't just won the moment as she'd rewritten what the moment was allowed to be. In her office later that night, Jasmine sat with her shoes off, her heels kicked onto the couch, watching a silent replay of the panel on mute. Leela handed her a bottle of cranberry juice and said, "He'll recover." "They always do." Jasmine smiled. "I don't care if he recovers." Pause. "I care that people saw it. That they saw we don't have to shrink just to be taken seriously." She leaned back. The envelope he now opened sat in a small tray near the edge of her desk. "I wasn't trying to win a debate," she added. "I was just tired of being asked to prove I belong." Across town, in a secure West Wing briefing room, JD Vance was on a late-night call with the president's re-election team. They weren't angry. They were calculating. "She's got traction now," one strategist warned. "Watch her closely." "She already made her move," Vance said. "There's no encore." But he didn't believe it. Not really. Because Jasmine Crockett didn't bluff. She just waited. Until the moment mattered.